Some time ago I was given this Stagg XB300 bass, which as you can see had a bit of a problem with it. It was very severely bent, but it all seemed to be in good order in hardware fashion, and it was in good condition, but clearly it had been neglected in some way or other. But after some basic setting up, after a few days of settling down and a full fret dress, it became quite a playable and certainly good sounding instrument. However, there was a problem with it in that the body balance was really quite bad, so a lot of neck dive, couldn't get on with it. It just ended up residing on the wall until something came to mind to do with it. Now I'm working on a project at the moment where I've been using the short scale fretless that I made, and it's proven to be quite tricky to get the intonation where I'd like it to be, so with it being much more fussy on a short scale, I decided to make myself a regular long scale bass and see if that would help the situation, and thought that this instrument would be the good donor for it, so long as it had a new body to sort the weight issue out and the balance in particular. First thing to do, of course, is to get the frets out. Use the same method as always, soldering iron to heat the fret up, softens the glue, makes them come out much more readily. No issues with splintering that can't be fairly easily dealt with if you do it this way. If you take them out dry and cold, there is definitely a bigger risk of splintering in particular, and you're left with a lot of the glue in the slot as well. As much as it needs to be cleaned out, then it's just more work, so good way to go. I don't like dot markers on fretless, so I'm whipping those out as well, just simply drilling out the centre and then prise them out once you've got a hole to work around. Came out fairly readily, no issues. The fingerboard is reported as being a rosewood, fairly low end rosewood. Some staining I think had been done to this one, that was the impression that I had. And a very quick rub down was done just to very basically straighten it with a bit of truss rod adjustment so that it was dead straight under a straight edge. And this allowed me to get the process started to fit the fret position markers, or the position markers should we call them, which I like. So a long straight edge was clamped to the neck and white sections fitted to the top edge. The side of these sections, which is butted up against the rule edge, need to be quite true so that when the fill side from the other side comes in and they're flatted down, that they are in the right positions and nice and straight down the neck. So worth some time keeping those nice and right angles on the end. And once you've done through the whole neck, then black sections were put onto the other side. Another way of filling these fret slots. Trying a few, but I'm getting to the point where it doesn't really matter which method you use, the frets will show up in one way or another just because of a change in material, so they do sort of come through a little bit. The way to have a decent fretless is to have a proper fretless neck, no doubt, but this is a good thing to do with an instrument which at the end of the day was not really going to see much output. So simply dress down and then just a quick wipe over there of the classic super glues, layer upon layer. There's plenty of videos out there, as I've mentioned before, to show you how to do that. Here's a pretty high contrast image of the final face of the fingerboard. The rest of the neck hasn't been touched yet, so first thing to do there was to move on to the headstock, where I wanted to just introduce a little bit more interesting shape to the end to make it a bit lighter visually and narrowed the whole thing a bit. And for the body, I had this Yamaha come to me, which was in a bit of a sore condition, and I spent some time fettling this one up, and I ended up with this instrument, which I really like, really happy with that. And I particularly like the body shape, so I very simply traced around that, modified it very slightly just to make the top horn a little bit slimmer, and then place that onto what was the top of a walnut veneered coffee table, something from a charity shop which was quite badly damaged, and certainly a reasonably contemporary piece of furniture considering it's maple plywood that it's veneered onto. So no losses there antique wise. It just would have been on a fire somewhere ultimately, I think. So I like these beautiful veneers, so I saw the table, grabbed it from a charity shop and cut the top surface out of that one. I retained a little bit that was on the right there just for the headstock, and the main bulk of the body was another coffee table which was in poor condition. It was warped and badly stained. Teak, very dry teak, so 2 laminations of that were going to be used, so trace and cut. The section of the walnut veneered ply I wanted for the headstock needed to be slimmed down, so this is just going on a fly cutter and a milling machine to take its thickness down. You can see here what I ended up with underneath a sample piece of the original. I'd like to have gone thinner, but it becomes a bit too delicate using that fly cutting process, and I don't really have a flat sanding means to get it any better than that, so I just took it down by hand to balance it, and that's good enough for me. Laminating the body together, bought more clamps since the last time, good job too. Just left for a couple of hours then before it was then trimmed out. Same thing on the headstock with just patching the veneer onto the front. I took a layer off the face of the headstock too, so that this particular thickness of veneer would bring it back up to the original thickness, so everything fitted okay. And there's a trimmed result, and the body, when it came out of some basic shaping, starting to look nice. The back of it's a bit plain and uninteresting, a couple of screw holes to deal with, don't care. It's the back of the instrument for this kind of thing, which is for my use. It's not as if I'm selling it, that I don't mind such things. They'll just be wax filled. Use the milling machine to route out all the cavities that were necessary for the humbucker there. I decided just to fit the humbucker for now. I'll put the neck pickup in maybe a bit later on, but that was the one I was using when I was fiddling with the original instrument more than anything, so quite like that idea. And I had something in the way of a plan to fit a active circuit, which we'll get to at the end. Routing out the rear control cavity with a section for a battery, with the plan being to have this active circuit. You can see the exit point for the bridge earth, which were pre-routed into the laminations before they were joined together. Just a rough mock-up of the thing. I like to do these setups just to give you an idea of how things are going. Starting to look alright. I needed a binding that was going to be able to accommodate the full thickness of the ply, so managed to find one at 7mm. It was 6mm ply plus the paper thin veneer, so 7mm was perfect, and that was put on in as a mixture of the acetone soak method, which I got mixed feelings about first time I've done it. It works, but you've got to be really cautious with the acetone because it softens the plastic significantly, and it may soften it in places where you don't want it to be softened, and it takes a great deal of time to harden back up again, and some of it never seems to recover fully. So I did the bulk of the fixing with the acetone after I'd piecemealed my way around the guitar, just tacking it down with super glue and then taping it to pull it in finally, and then letting the acetone soak in for the rest of the process. Think about that one again when I do it again, because wasn't 100% enjoyable, that process. It did leave me with these soft patches which were a bit strange to deal with. Conformance was good though, and the material's nice and easy to shape down. The back of it was simply routed with a radius just to soften it, And then I took to it with a few shaping tools, just a flat wheel on an angle grinder and my trusty Black & Decker power file, one of my favourite tools. And that was then softened up by hand, and the process started of sealing it all up. Quite a lot of sealer needed for this, very open grain teak, quite dry. I wanted to go for a satin finish on the back, but a gloss on the front sides and on the neck. So layer upon layer upon layer, with a flatting in between. I mean, it's all very well saying it probably had about 12 coats of lacquer, but there's probably only 3 coats left on it in reality in thickness. So it's quite a thin coat of just single pack acrylic. See, the end grain is, this was after the second or third application, so the end grain is still sucking it in a little bit there, but it filled up eventually. I didn't want to use a grain filler because I've always found them too obvious. They look, and the colour match is never absolute right across the entire colour range of a piece of wood, so it just always has this impression of this filler being in it. So I was more than happy to just fill it with sealer and lacquer. I didn't want to attempt to bind the headstock, but to match the edge trim, as it were, I just went for a paint option by layering on multiple coats of cellulose to a quite high build. And when that was masking tape then was removed, I built lacquer up to the same level as the black and then lacquered over the top with a simple signature in the middle of the headstock. You know, it's got Stagg written all over the tuners and the neck plate, so I'm not trying to hide anything here. Starting to polish it up. Very pleased. No issues at all with this lacquer, nice and easy to work, and it's one of these ones that doesn't shrink too much. It takes a few days for it to harden up fully, but you can start working it within 24 hours, and if you take the worst off while it's soft and then just go back and give it that final bling a few days later, it comes up looking very good. It's not a dead true surface on the face there, because I had to be cautious, because where there was damage to the veneer, there's just no way that you could rub them out and flatten the whole thing, because the veneer literally was paper thin, maybe like 120 gram paper, or thin card, something like that, and it was too much of a risk to end up flatting through it, so I was more than happy with these tiny undulations you can see for what the reflection of the straight edge of the door has just got little warbles in it. It's acceptable. Headstock looks okay. Yeah, I've got to learn how to bind a headstock, I think. So the finished instrument is quite presentable. I like it. It's certainly balanced, that's the key thing. The timber looks great, even though it's a cruciform veneer. It's not too obvious where the vertical join is without just glancing and specifically looking for it, so that's good. The active circuit is in. What I've done there is taken a system from a Ibanez bass, which has what I believe is a bass treble and a parametric mid. Not quite sure, I need to look into that, but whatever. Huge variance in tone control coming out the active circuit. And I've used the humbucker to split into the mixer knob, so you simply pan between the coil that's closest to the bridge and the one that's closest to the neck, and there's a very slight variation in tone, but it's proving to be perfectly adequate for what I'm needed it for, so I'll leave that for now. We'll maybe explore the neck pickup later on, but it's going to do for now. And as it's turned out, it's given me some sounds that I want, and it is certainly easier to play. So coming up, my next video is going to be what I've done with it. That'll be something to prove the point. Thanks for your time.